Hello, everyone. Today we come to a time when the ocean was the wildest, most lawless place on Earth. The word pirate usually brings to mind a very specific, almost theatrical image, doesn't it? A daring hero or rogue with a parrot on his shoulder, a treasure map in his pocket, and a polished cutlass in his hand. We imagine a life of thrilling adventure, absolute freedom, and chests full of gold coins buried beneath swaying palms. It's a beautifully crafted lie, a legend woven from rum-soaked dreams. The real life of a sailor who chose the black flag during the Golden Age of Piracy, roughly the early 1700s, was usually not romantic at all. It was a life chosen out of sheer, bone-deep desperation to escape a tyranny far more brutal and inescapable than anything they would find on a pirate ship. It was a world of unending, back-breaking labor, sickness, and hard-scrabble existence, only interrupted by moments of terrifying, intense danger. Tonight, we will leave the comforting legends behind and see what it was really like. We will step aboard one of these crowded wooden ships and explore the surprising democratic rules that govern them. Learn about the simple, often vile, food they ate, the fears they faced, and why so many ordinary men chose a short, risky life under the Jolly Roger instead of a long, unhappy one serving a distant king or a greedy merchant. But before we dive into this dark history, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a simple and wonderful way to support the channel, and it means a great deal to me. And now, settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away, and let us travel back to a time of tarred rope, black powder, and the open sea. Our story doesn't begin with a famous pirate captain. It begins with an ordinary person. Let's imagine that you are this person. You are not a hero, not a villain. You are simply a sailor somewhere in your early 20s, and your entire world is this small, damp, wooden ship creaking its way across the vast and empty Atlantic Ocean. It is 2 hours before dawn, and you are already exhausted. You were woken an hour ago, not by a gentle shake, but by the sharp, metallic bark of the boatswain, the senior sailor in charge of the deck crew, his authority absolute and immediate. Your hands are raw, perpetually blistered, healed, and blistered again from hauling on the coarse, salt-stiffened ropes that control the massive sails above you. The air is cold and heavy with salt spray that never seems to dry, chilling you to the bone. Every muscle in your back and shoulders aches from the relentless work of the previous day and the day before that, and every day for the past 6 months since you left port in Bristol. This is your life on a merchant vessel in the year 1716. It is not a life of adventure. It is a life of unending, back-breaking servitude. You and the few dozen other men on board are a tiny human island in an endless, indifferent ocean, and your work never stops. You are constantly adjusting the rigging, climbing high into the mast on swaying ropes to furl or unfurl sails with nothing but 100 feet of empty air and churning sea below you, a single slip away from death. You work the pumps to expel the foul, stagnant bilge water that constantly seeps into the hull. You scrub the decks, you mend the sails, you tear the ropes. You do this day in and day out, in blistering sun and freezing rain. For this ceaseless labor, you are paid a pittance, and even that meager payment is not guaranteed. As a sailor on a merchant ship, you are not paid your wages until the voyage is completely over and the cargo is delivered. If the ship sinks in a storm, you get nothing. If you die of disease or accident halfway through the journey, your family back home gets nothing. And even if you make it all the way back to port, the captain, a man with absolute authority over your fate, can easily cheat you. A captain can invent fines for supposed infractions. A misplaced tool, a moment of perceived laziness, a glance given at the wrong time, and deduct them from your hard-earned wages. You have seen it happen on every voyage. Men who worked for a year straight, only to end up with a few shillings in their pocket, just enough to get drunk for a single night before signing on to another ship to do it all over again. It was a debt cycle enforced by the sea itself. The food is worse than the pay. Your daily ration is a biscuit called hardtack, which is little more than flour, water, and salt baked into a cracker as hard as a piece of wood. It has to be soaked in water or beer just to be chewed. and it is almost always infested with weevils, small black beetles that lived in the barrels of flour, forcing you to eat protein whether you wanted it or not. The meat is salted beef or pork stored for months in barrels, so saturated with salt that it has to be scraped and soaked for hours before it can be choked down. The water is the worst of all, stored in wooden casks where it quickly becomes stagnant, green, and slimy. This diet of salt and starch, with virtually no fresh fruit or vegetables, leads inevitably to scurvy. You have seen men suffer from it, a slow, horrifying descent. You have seen their gums bleed, their teeth fall out, their old wounds reopen and weep, their minds grow confused, all from the lack of simple nourishment. It was a disease that turned a healthy man into a living ruin. And looming over all this hardship is the constant, arbitrary threat of discipline. The captain of a merchant ship is a king in his floating kingdom. His word is law, and his primary tool of enforcement is the whip. The cat o' nine tails, a whip with multiple knotted lashes, can turn a man's back into a ruin of bleeding flesh for the smallest offense. Arguing with an officer, being too slow to climb the rigging, or even just being personally disliked by the captain is enough to warrant a flogging. There is no trial, no appeal, just the sharp whistle of a lash and the brutal, searing pain. You know you're lucky in a way. You chose this life. Many sailors in the King's Royal Navy did not. They were pressed into service, kidnapped from the streets of a port town, or taken from another ship at sea and forced to serve. In the Navy, the discipline is even harsher, the work just as hard, and you have the constant added terror of being killed in a naval battle, your world exploding in a shower of cannonballs and wooden splinters. So this is your world, a world of constant work, terrible food, stolen wages, and arbitrary, brutal punishment. Your future holds nothing more than an endless cycle of these miserable voyages until the sea or sickness finally claims you. Piracy to you is not a romantic notion plucked from a storybook. It is a whisper, a rumor, a dangerous story told by other sailors in hushed tones. It's a dangerous path, yes, a path to the gallows, but it is a different one. It is a path to a life you might actually own, even if only for a short time. One gray morning, as you are squinting at the horizon, your hands chapped and aching from the morning watch, you see it. A strange sail, a fast-moving ship closing on your vessel with an unnerving speed. It flies no colors you recognize. As it draws closer, the men around you begin to murmur, their faces pale with fear, a silent, sickening dread passing through the crew like a fever. They know what this might be, but for you, buried beneath the fear, a different feeling begins to stir. A small, dangerous spark of something else entirely. Curiosity. The ship grows larger, slicing through the waves with a predatory purpose your own bulky merchant vessel entirely lacks. It's a sloop, a smaller, faster, and more nimble ship, its single mainsail giving it an agility that leaves your own ship wallowing. You notice it's crowded with men, far more than would be needed for a simple trading voyage. They stand ready, their postures relaxed yet alert, a confidence radiating off them that is unsettling. They look like sailors, but sailors who have nothing to lose. The captain of your ship is shouting orders, his voice tight with fear and a frantic, failing hope. The men around you move with a panicked energy, running to load the few, small, and generally poorly maintained cannons. Then the moment of truth arrives. A puff of white smoke blossoms from the side of the approaching sloop. A second later, you hear the deep, echoing boom of a cannon, and a cannonball skips across the water just in front of your ship's bow, sending a geyser of spray into the air. This is the warning shot, a clear and universal signal on the high seas that means, stop your vessel immediately, or the next shot will not be a warning. It will be a killing blow. Your captain is no fool. He knows his ship is slower, his crew is smaller and untrained for combat, and his few small cannons are no match for the firepower of a vessel dedicated solely to the art of attack. To fight will be suicide. His cargo is insured by wealthy men in London who will receive their gold either way. His life is not. With a defeated curse, he gives the order to strike the colors, to lower your ship's flag in a sign of surrender. The tension on deck turns from panic to a kind of grim, fearful resignation. The pirate sloop skillfully maneuvers alongside, its crew moving with a practiced, almost casual synchronization. With a crash of grappling hooks and rope, the two ships are bound together in a sudden, violent embrace. And then they are aboard. They spill over the railing, not as a disorganized, screaming mob, but as a confident, organized team. You see now that they are sailors just like you. Their faces are weathered by the same sun and sea. Their hands bear the same calluses from the ropes. But there is a crucial difference. They move with an air of freedom and confidence you have never seen on a merchant ship. No one is shouting. No one looks terrified. They are well armed, each man carrying a pistol tucked into his belt and a sword at his side, symbols of their new status as masters of their own destiny. They quickly and efficiently disarm your ship's officers and gather your crew on the main deck. You stand there, heart pounding, braced for the brutal violence you have always been told to expect from these outlaws. But there is no immediate violence. Instead, a man steps forward who is clearly in charge, though he isn't the captain. This is the quartermaster. On a pirate ship, he was the second in command, the man who represented the crew's interests, handled discipline, and was responsible for dividing any plunder. He was often more powerful than the captain in day-to-day life. His voice is calm, direct, and entirely without threat. He tells your crew that they have no interest in harming any ordinary sailor. Their quarrel is not with the working man. They are here for the cargo, and for anyone who wishes to join their company. He lays out the offer with a cold clarity. You can stay with your captain, continue your voyage, and face the same life of misery and poverty you have always known, an endless road of weevils and the whip. Or you can leave it all behind. You can join them. You can become one of them, a free man entitled to an equal share of every prize they take. You look at the faces of your crewmates. For most, fear wins out. They have families, perhaps a fiancé, a small cottage in a coastal town, and a deep, abiding, and rational fear of the hangman's noose. They choose the known misery over the unknown, glorious damnation. But you see a few others, men like you, with little to lose and no future to look forward to. Men who have already accepted that their lives are forfeit, whether by the sea, scurvy, or the lash. And you can see the same spark in their eyes that you feel in your own chest, a desperate, blinding hope for something more than mere survival. The choice, you realize, is truly yours. The pirates don't want to force you. They have escaped tyranny themselves. They have no interest in commanding a crew of unwilling captives. They want volunteers, brothers who will willingly fight alongside them. So you weigh your life in that moment, a stark, simple accounting. On one side, a guaranteed future of backbreaking work, spoiled food, arbitrary fines, and the constant sting of the whip, all for wages you might never see. On the other, the promise of plunder, of equality, of respect, and the right to stand as a man, even if the shadow of the gallows falls over every port. It is the choice between a long, slow, dehumanizing misery and a life that will likely be short, dangerous, and violent, but at least will be your own. You and two other sailors step forward. The quartermaster grins, a flash of white in his sun-darkened face. He gestures for you to cross over to the pirate ship. As you climb over the railing, leaving your old vessel and your old life behind, shedding the skin of servitude, one of the pirates hands you a tin mug filled with a cloudy, alcoholic liquid. It is grog, a simple drink of watered-down rum, sometimes mixed with lime or sugar. It is the lifeblood of sailors everywhere. But this mug tastes different. It tastes not merely of rum, but of freedom. Your old ship, now poorer by a few crewmen and a hold full of cargo, detaches and slowly sails away. You stand on the deck of a pirate vessel, surrounded by the so-called enemies of all mankind. You are now one of them. The initial relief begins to fade, replaced by a new, pressing reality. You have joined their society, but you do not yet know its loss. You stand on the deck of your new ship, the taste of grog still on your lips. The initial wave of adrenaline and relief has passed, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. You have escaped the tyranny of your old captain, But what have you joined? How can a ship full of men who have rejected all authority possibly function without tearing itself apart in a week? The answer comes a short while later. The quartermaster, the man who invited you aboard, gathers you and the other new recruits. He unrolls a sheet of parchment, its edges worn from use and damp from the sea air. This, he explains, is the foundation of their society. These are the ship's Articles of Agreement, more famously known to history as the Pirate Code. You learn immediately that this is not a set of rules imposed from above by the captain. On this ship, there is no absolute king. Before any voyage, the entire crew gathers together. They debate, they argue, and they vote on every single rule written on this page, down to the punishment for the most minor offense. Every man, from the captain down to you, the newest recruit, has an equal say. The captain himself is elected and can be removed from command by a majority vote if the crew is not satisfied with his leadership or, more critically, if he proves to be a coward in battle. You have just joined not merely a ship's crew, but a floating democratic republic. It's a concept so radical, so contrary to the rigidly hierarchical world of the Royal Navy and the merchant fleets that it takes a moment to fully grasp. This system was a direct, calculated rejection of the tyranny of the British naval system, where a captain's power was literally divine, granted by the king. On this ship, power was granted by the people. The quartermaster begins to read some of the key articles aloud, ensuring you understand the contract you are about to sign. First, and most important, every man has an equal vote in the affairs of the moment. This means any major decision, whether to attack a ship, where to sail next, or what punishments to hand out, is decided by the crew as a whole. No single man dictates the course of the ship. This ensures that the crew's collective interest in profit and survival always supersedes the captain's personal greed or whim. Second, and perhaps the most revolutionary concept for a working sailor, no prey, no pay. You will receive no wages, and therefore, you cannot be cheated out of them. Your payment is a fair share of whatever is plundered, a shareholder's dividend. The articles specify exactly how the loot will be divided, ensuring an ironclad system of transparency. The captain might receive 2 full shares, a deserved bonus for his skill in navigation and command. The quartermaster, who is the voice and safeguard of the crew, might receive 1.5. Skilled men like the ship's surgeon or the carpenter, whose expertise is vital for survival, might also get a slightly larger portion. But you, as a regular sailor, are entitled to 1 full share. No deductions, no tricks, no arbitrary fines. You will get exactly what you are owed every single time a prize is taken. To put this in perspective, a merchant sailor might work a year for what a pirate could make in a single successful raid. When a pirate received his share of, say, 100 pieces of 8, the common Spanish silver dollar that was the currency of the seas, it was a fortune he might never have seen otherwise. Third, there are rules of conduct designed specifically to maintain peace in the close confines of the ship. Any quarrel between 2 men must be settled on shore with pistols or swords, a bizarre form of civilized duel to prevent disruptive fighting on the crowded ship itself. There are to be no women allowed on board. Another rule designed to prevent the catastrophic jealousy and conflict that inevitably arises from romantic rivalry. And every man is expected to keep his pistols and sword clean and ready for action at all times. On a pirate ship, every man is his own defense, and a poorly maintained weapon could cost the lives of the whole crew. Fourth, a rule born purely of practicality. Lights out at 8 o'clock. You learn this isn't a strict bedtime. It's a critical fire safety rule. After 8 p.m., there are to be no open flames from candles or lamps for gambling or drinking. On a wooden ship filled with barrels of gunpowder, sailcloth, and tarred ropes, a single careless flame could doom everyone within minutes. The collective safety of the crew always outweighed the individual desire for a late-night card game. And then comes the most surprising article of all, a system of compensation for injuries sustained in battle. This is their version of insurance, a collective promise. A man who loses his right arm in a fight might be awarded 600 pieces of 8. The loss of a leg might be worth 500, an eye 100. This money was paid out from the ship's treasury before the rest of the plunder was divided. It was a promise that your brothers would take care of you, a level of care and respect unimaginable on the merchant ship you just left, where an injury simply meant you were thrown out on the docks to starve. After reading the articles, the quartermaster lays the parchment on the lid of a barrel. He looks at you and the other new men. This is the final step. To join the Brotherhood, you must sign. You take the offered quill, dip it in ink, and make your mark on the document. By doing this, you are entering into a sacred contract. You are agreeing to live by these rules, to fight for your brothers, and to accept the severe punishments for breaking your oath. You have now formally sworn your allegiance. You are a full member of the crew with a right to a vote and a right to a share of any prize. You are part of a society of outlaws, governed by its own surprisingly fair and orderly laws. But a society is more than just its rules. It is also the physical space it occupies. With the formalities over, you take your first proper look around, seeing the ship not as a captive anymore, but as a resident. This is your home now, the very same sloop that ran down your old vessel with such ease. You realize now why it was chosen. It's not a massive, clumsy warship, but it's lean, fast, and nimble, a captured merchant vessel that has been systematically transformed from a simple workhorse into a predator of the sea lanes. Your new crew has already made significant, pragmatic modifications. You see far more cannons on deck than a merchant ship would ever carry, their black iron muzzles staring out from newly cut gun ports along the side of the hull. The decks have been cleared of any unnecessary clutter. The captain's ornate cabin has likely been dismantled, the walls, called bulkheads, torn out to make more room for men to fight and for cannons to traverse. This vessel has been hardened, optimized for the sole purpose of attack and speed. You walk the main deck, taking in the controlled chaos. There are thick coils of rope neatly tied down. There are pyramids of iron cannonballs secured with netting to prevent them from rolling free in a storm or during a battle. You see spare spars, the long wooden poles used to hold the sails, lashed to the sides of the ship, ready to replace any that might be broken in a storm or a battle. Nothing is ornamental. Everything is functional. You close your eyes for a moment to simply listen. You hear the constant, deep groan of the ship's timbers, like an old man's sigh as it strains against the waves. You hear the rhythmic lapping of the water against the hull, a sound that will be with you day and night. Above, you hear the sharp snap of the canvas sails as they catch the wind, and the high, lonely cry of a seabird. It is a symphony of wood, wind, and water that will now define your existence. The smells are just as strong and just as defining. The clean, sharp scent of the salt spray mixed with the pungent, almost medicinal smell of the tar used to waterproof the ship's wood and ropes. Beneath that, you catch the whiff of black powder, old rum, and sweat. This is the authentic smell of a warship, your new home. But the real heart of the ship, the physical reality of the crew's existence, you soon discover, is below deck. As you climb down the ladder into the gloom, a thick, warm, and heavy air envelopes you. This is the 'tween deck, the main living quarters. There are no private cabins here, no walls, no doors. That luxury is reserved for the officers of the ships you prey upon. This single, low-ceilinged space is where you and over 80 other men will sleep. You see rows upon rows of hammocks, lengths of canvas slung from the overhead beams. They're hung so close together that you can easily reach out and touch the man next to you. You learn that hammocks were a brilliant innovation, one that sailors and pirates adopted from the native peoples of the Americas. Unlike a fixed bunk or a simple mattress on the floor, a hammock sways with the constant rolling motion of the ship, cradling you and preventing you from being violently thrown to the wet floor during rough seas. It provides a level of comfort and rest that a merchant sailor's hard plank of wood could never offer. The air down here is a complex mixture of smells. It smells of unwashed bodies, of stale rum, of damp wool, and something else, a foul, sour smell coming from below your feet. This, you are told, is the bilge. The bilge is the very bottom of the ship's hull, a dark, inaccessible space where all the foul water collects. Seawater that leaks through the planks, spilled food and drink, and all other forms of human waste gather down there, sloshing back and forth into a putrid, sickening soup. The stomach-turning smell of the bilge is a constant presence, a scent that permeates the very wood of the ship and the clothes on your back. It is the defining, inescapable smell of your new home. You realize that on this vessel, there is no such thing as privacy. You will eat, work, and sleep within arm's reach of 80 to 100 other men. This density is a deliberate military choice. A pirate ship carries the highest crew-to-tonnage ratio of any vessel on the seas, ensuring maximum firepower for boarding. But this proximity also makes the pirate code profoundly sensible. You now understand why the ship's articles had such strict rules against fighting on board. In such a crowded and intimate space, small disagreements could easily boil over into dangerous, ship-dooming violence if not properly managed. You find an empty space between two cannons and are shown how to sling your own hammock. As you lie back in the gently swaying canvas, you listen to the symphony of the ship's sounds. The creaking wood, the snoring men, the distant waves. You are surrounded by this new family. You know the rules. You know the layout of your new home. But what do you actually do all day? You wake to the gentle rocking of your hammock. It's dark, but you can hear the sounds of men stirring around you. Your first full day as a pirate is about to begin. The question that formed in your mind as you fell asleep, what do you actually do all day, is about to be answered. You quickly learn that a pirate's life is not one of lazy leisure, simply waiting for a prize to appear. A pirate ship is a complex wooden machine, and it demands constant, meticulous attention. Your day and your entire existence at sea is governed by the watch system. The crew is divided into two halves, or watches. Your half is on duty for a 4-hour shift, then off duty for the next 4 hours, in a relentless 4-4 cycle that repeats all day and all night. There is no weekend, no day off. There is only the watch. This system, designed to keep half the crew alert and rested at all times, dictates the entire rhythm of your body, blurring the line between day and night. During your time on watch, the work is familiar yet different. The most important task is, of course, sailing the ship. You and your watchmates are constantly trimming the sails, pulling on ropes to adjust their angle to catch the wind in the most efficient way possible. It's a delicate art, a constant, necessary conversation between the crew, the canvas, and the invisible wind. A fast ship is a successful ship, and a successful ship means wealth. But most of the work is maintenance. Endless, repetitive, but vital maintenance. You spend hours sitting on the deck with a mallet and a chisel performing a task called caulking. This means hammering sticky, tarred rope fibers called oakum into the seams between the wooden planks of the deck and hull. It's a slow, tedious job, but it is the physical barrier that keeps the sea from invading the ship, preventing it from taking on water and sinking. Other days, you are sent aloft with a bucket of tar to coat the rigging, protecting the thick ropes from being destroyed by the relentless sun and salt spray. You scrub the decks not just to keep them clean, but to scour away the slippery green algae that grows in the damp sea air. You check the cannons, making sure they are secure, that the mechanisms are clean, and that the gunpowder stores nearby are kept perfectly dry. Sometimes you're assigned lookout duty. You climb the rigging high up to the crow's nest, a small wooden platform at the top of the mainmast. From here, you are the eyes of the ship, and the view is immense. A 360-degree panorama of nothing but the endless, shifting blue of the ocean meeting the pale blue of the sky. Your job is to stare into that emptiness for hours, searching for the one thing that matters. Another sail, a distant plume of smoke, a sign of land, a potential prize. It is a lonely, hypnotizing task where the only sounds are the whistling of the wind and the creak of the mast beneath you. When your 4-hour watch is finally over, you are relieved by the other half of the crew. But your time off watch is not truly for leisure. This is when you eat your rations. This is when you must find time to sleep, to gather your strength for the next shift. And this is when you perform your own personal maintenance, sharpening your knife, mending a tear in your shirt, or washing your clothes in a bucket of seawater. After 4 hours of hard physical labor, the desire for sleep is often overwhelming, a battle you must lose and win every 4 hours. The tasks themselves are nearly identical to the work you did on the merchant ship, and yet everything is different. There is no bosun screaming insults at you. There is no officer threatening you with a whip for a minor mistake. The men work together with a quiet, practiced efficiency because they know the ship is their own. A well-maintained vessel is a faster vessel, more likely to catch a prize. A clean cannon is a weapon that will fire true when it's needed. You are not working out of fear. You are working for a shared purpose. You are a shareholder in this enterprise, and the work you do directly contributes to your own potential fortune. The mood is lighter. The conversations are freer. You are treated as an equal, a brother, a partner. The days begin to bleed into one another, marked only by the changing of the watch and the position of the sun. The rhythm of work, eat, sleep, work becomes your entire world. You realize that the great enemy on these long voyages between prizes is not the Royal Navy, nor is it the storm. It is the vast, soul-crushing boredom of the open sea, the sheer monotony of being surrounded by nothing but blue, and the relentless, hypnotic routine. As you fall into this routine, you begin to observe the men around you more closely. You see how this society truly functions. You see that the captain is respected and his orders are followed in battle. But in the day-to-day life of the ship, it is the quartermaster that the men listen to. It is the quartermaster who settles disputes, who distributes the rations, who seems to hold the true balance of power. As the weeks pass, you begin to truly understand the answer to the question that has been forming in your mind. How does a ship full of outlaws govern itself? You see now that it is not one man who leads, but two, in a delicate and ingenious balance of power specifically designed to prevent the kind of tyranny you escaped. First, there's the captain. You notice that he is treated with a certain respect, not because of his rank, but because of his skill. He is the expert sailor, the master navigator, the man who can read the waves and the stars. His primary job is to guide the ship and to command it in battle. He is, in essence, the ship's war chief. When a potential prize is spotted on the horizon, a visible change comes over the ship. The democratic, almost casual atmosphere instantly sharpens and snaps into a military precision. In that moment of the chase or the battle, the captain's authority becomes absolute. His orders are obeyed instantly and without question by every man on board. He decides the angle of attack, when to fire the cannons, and when to board. During a chase or a battle, he is the undisputed king of the vessel. This is a practical matter. In the chaos of combat, there is no time for a debate or a vote. The crew puts their trust in his skill to win the prize and keep them all alive. But here is the crucial difference. As soon as the battle is over, his absolute power vanishes like smoke. He steps back and once again becomes a man among equals. He is still the captain, but he cannot order a man flogged for a minor insult. He cannot change the destination of the ship on a whim. He cannot even claim the largest portion of the captain's cabin for himself without the crew's agreement. He was elected to his position, and if he proves to be a coward in battle or consistently fails to find prizes, the crew can hold a vote at any time and depose him, electing a new captain in his place. He is a leader who serves at the pleasure of the crew. The true, day-to-day power on the ship, you learn, belongs to the quartermaster. He is the peace chief. While the captain is the crew's leader in war, the quartermaster is the crew's advocate. He is the voice of the men, elected to protect their interests and ensure fairness. His responsibilities are vast, making him the most important administrative officer. He is in charge of the ship's stores, distributing the daily rations of food and water to ensure every man gets his equal share, a vital task in a world built on inequality. He is the ship's judge and jury. If you have a dispute with another sailor, you do not take it to the captain, you take it to the quartermaster. He listens to both sides and makes a ruling, and his decision is respected and binding. He also administers all punishments that the crew has voted on according to the articles. So if a man is to be flogged or marooned, it is the quartermaster, not the captain, who gives the order, removing the power of personal vengeance and arbitrary brutality from the captain's hands. When a prize is taken, the quartermaster leads the boarding party. He is the one who decides what plunder is to be taken from the captured vessel, and he is the keeper of all that plunder until it can be brought to a safe port and divided. He ensures that every coin, every bolt of cloth, every barrel of wine is accounted for and shared out exactly as the articles prescribe. He is the guardian of the sacred contract. You now see the genius of this system. It is a separation of powers born from the bitter experience of men who had been oppressed by merchant captains who held both command and judicial authority. They gave one man, the captain, the power to lead them in war. But they gave another man, the quartermaster, the power to protect them from that same leader in times of peace. It was a system of checks and balances that ensured no single man could ever hold absolute power over the crew again. It was a government for the people, by the people, on a floating wooden republic of outlaws, and its very existence was the most radical thing about piracy. You see this system in action every day as the quartermaster moves through the ship, settling a card game dispute here, distributing the daily ration of grog there. The system works because it is built on the bedrock of fairness. Everyone gets their share, but as you receive your daily portion of salted beef and hardtack, a new thought comes to mind. What exactly is that share? The question of what you eat and drink is one of the most fundamental parts of your new life. You quickly learn that the standard rations on a pirate ship are at first disappointingly similar to the grim menu of the merchant vessel you so gladly left behind. The foundation of your diet is still the hardtack, the rock-hard flour and water biscuit, likely dotted with the small, black specks of weevils that the heat of the oven couldn't kill. These ubiquitous beetles were such a common part of a sailor's diet that a popular method of eating the biscuit was to eat it in the dark, so you couldn't see the tiny black bodies crawling on the surface. The main source of protein is still salted meat, either beef or pork that has been cured in barrels of brine for so long that it is tough, chewy, and overwhelmingly salty. This is supplemented by sacks of dried peas, beans, or oatmeal, which could be turned into a kind of porridge. It is a diet of preservation, designed to last for months in the damp hold of a ship, not for pleasure or health. Your drink is also much the same. Water stored in casks quickly goes foul, becoming stagnant and slimy. So alcohol is an essential purifier and morale booster. The daily ration of grog, the mix of rum and water, is a treasured ritual, a moment of warmth and cheer in a long day. The rum was often a low-quality, raw spirit distilled in the Caribbean, but it made the stale water more palatable and provided a brief, necessary escape from the monotony of life at sea. For many, it was the only small pleasure they could count on. But here is where you discover the pirate's great advantage. Unlike a merchant ship, which must sail from port A to port B on a strict schedule, a pirate vessel is master of its own time. Your captain is not in a hurry to deliver perishable cargo. This freedom gives you the ability to supplement your diet in ways a merchant sailor could only dream of, turning a meal from an obligation into a genuine, restorative feast. If the ship is running low on supplies, your captain has the liberty to change course and stop at a small, uninhabited island. The crew will go ashore in longboats, armed not for battle, but for hunting. You spend the day tracking wild pigs or goats through the jungle, a welcome, land-based relief from the confines of the ship. The animals are brought back and the crew builds a roaring fire on the beach, roasting the fresh meat over a wooden grill called a boucan. This is where the term buccaneer originates. Men who dried and smoked their meat over a boucan. The taste of fresh, unsalted meat, hot from the flames, is a luxury so profound it feels like a feast for a king, a moment of true indulgence after weeks of salt and starch. At sea, you fish. Men will trail lines from the stern of the ship, hoping to catch tuna, dolphin, or other large fish to be shared among the crew. But the most prized catch of all is the giant sea turtle. Turtles were plentiful in the Caribbean, easy to catch while they slept on the surface of the water, and they were an ideal source of food. A single large turtle could feed the entire crew for a day or more. And remarkably, they could be kept alive on their backs on the deck for weeks, providing a source of fresh meat that could literally save the crew from starvation. This is the pirates' way, living off the sea and the land, taking what they could find, and maintaining a constant, hopeful flexibility that the strictly scheduled merchant mariner could never afford. But the greatest feast, the moments of true indulgence, came after a successful raid, a moment of catharsis for months of grinding routine. When a valuable prize, especially a ship carrying provisions, was captured, the menu transformed entirely. The quartermaster would inspect the captured provisions, and suddenly, the hardtack and salted beef were forgotten. The prize might yield barrels of fine European wine from France or Spain, or strong Portuguese brandy. These high-quality spirits were immediately broken open and shared out. For a brief period, the grog was replaced by something smooth, powerful, and utterly luxurious. There might be crates of fresh cheese, dried fruit, or even sacks of flour that hadn't yet been infested by weevils. These foods, which a merchant captain would have sold for profit, were immediately shared and consumed by the pirates as a reward for their labor. The plunder was often less about gold and more about these brief, tangible luxuries: silk shirts, clean linens, and a hold full of fine drink. These feasts were short-lived, wild affairs. The men would gather on deck, laughing, singing, and drinking, the momentary illusion of wealth and total freedom overpowering the reality of their danger. It was a necessary release after the soul-crushing boredom of the voyage and the terrifying intensity of the battle. It was a ritual of consumption that affirmed their outlaw status. They were not beholden to distant merchants. Their reward was immediate and consumed in a defiant moment of excess. A barrel of fine wine would be drunk in a day, a chest of preserved lemons eaten in a sitting. This cycle of extreme deprivation, followed by extreme excess, defined the emotional rhythm of the pirate's life. It was a life lived for the moment because they knew better than anyone how quickly that moment could end. Yet, even with the freedom to hunt and the brief feasts of captured luxury, the ultimate, relentless enemy of the sailor was always present: disease. The most feared, most prevalent killer was still scurvy. Despite the occasional fresh meat, the long stretches at sea meant that the men often went weeks or months without the single nutrient necessary to fight the illness: vitamin C. You have seen the progression firsthand, and it is a horrifying way to die. It begins subtly, a feeling of general fatigue, a dull ache in the limbs. Then the symptoms become unmistakable and terrifying. The gums swell and bleed, turning black and soft, making it excruciating to chew even the softened hardtack. The teeth loosen and fall out. The skin erupts in massive, dark bruises, often starting on the legs. And most bizarrely and terrifyingly, old wounds that have been fully healed for years will suddenly reopen and weep blood. The body literally begins to break down. The collagen that holds you together disintegrates, and the man descends into a confusion and despair that ends in a slow, agonizing death. Pirates, though they had an advantage, did not understand the cause. They simply knew that eating fresh meat and fruit seemed to stop the illness. The citrus fruits, limes, lemons, oranges, were known to be a cure, which is why they were so highly prized when captured. But they could not be preserved effectively, and once they ran out, the clock was ticking. The constant presence of disease meant that the quartermaster's article promising compensation for injury was not merely a sign of equality. It was a morbidly practical reality. A pirate was more likely to die from the lack of a simple lemon than from a cannonball. The man charged with fighting this array of sickness and the brutal injuries of battle was the ship's surgeon. He was a highly valued crew member, often receiving a share and a quarter, or even 1.5 shares of the plunder. A clear recognition that his skill was as vital to the ship's survival as the navigators. His work was a grim, bloody art performed in the chaotic, dim light of the 'tween deck. The surgeon's tools were terrifyingly simple, reflecting the crude state of 18th century medicine. A rusty-looking saw for amputations, a collection of knives and probes, needles and thread for stitching, and a branding iron to cauterize wounds and stop bleeding. There was, of course, no modern anesthetic. For a procedure like an amputation, a depressingly common treatment for a shattered limb hit by a cannonball splinter. The patient was simply given a large dose of rum, a leather strap to bite down on, and held down by several crewmen. The speed of the surgeon was the only mercy offered. His job was often less about healing and more about managing the inevitable. He could treat a simple fever or a deep cut, but when a man came down with yellow fever or the more common tropical dysentery, there was little he could do but make the man as comfortable as possible. The surgeon's greatest weapon was his own resilience and the vast stores of rum that served as both antiseptic and painkiller. The fact that the crew valued this man enough to give him an extra share of their hard-won loot speaks volumes about the constant, inescapable reality of injury and death at sea. Despite the ever-present threat of disease, there was no greater spectacle, no greater test of the crew's unity than the whirlwind of battle. When a prize was spotted, the entire atmosphere of the ship transformed. The casual camaraderie vanished, replaced by a focused, electric intensity. The ship, already cleared for action, went through a final, terrifying ritual. The gunners cleaned and loaded the cannons, ramming black powder and iron shot down the muzzle with practiced, synchronized force. The quartermaster, acting on the captain's orders, would order sand or sawdust to be spread across the main deck. This was not for cleaning. It was to prevent the men from slipping on the blood that would soon cover the planks. Then came the psychological transformation. The men secured their loose possessions, tied bandanas around their heads, and tucked multiple pistols into their belts, prepared for the close quarters, brutal fighting that boarding would entail. You, as a new recruit, would be assigned a role, perhaps as a powder monkey, tasked with scrambling below deck to the magazine to fetch cartridges of gunpowder for the gunners, a job of terrifying risk. The air would grow thick with the smell of sweat and the sharp, sulfuric scent of the black powder. The roar of the cannons was deafening, a physical blow to the chest that momentarily drowned out the shouts and the splintering of wood. The sea itself would boil with the impact of cannonballs. This was the moment the pirate ship became what it was designed to be, a terrifying weapon. And every man, from the captain to the powder monkey, knew that this violent, concentrated burst of chaos was their moment of reckoning. Their skill, their courage, and their fortune were decided in the space of a few agonizing minutes. As the pirate ship closed in on its prey, the ultimate statement was made, the raising of the flag. Most ships on the sea flew national colors, a symbol of allegiance and protection. The pirate ship flew the Jolly Roger, a defiant symbol of universal hostility. The sight of the black flag was a calculated piece of psychological warfare. It was not merely a symbol of intent, it was a clear warning. The traditional design, often a white skull over crossed bones or a skeleton holding an hourglass, was a deliberate, almost nihilistic metaphor. The skull was death. The hourglass was a warning that the crew of the merchant ship had run out of time. Crucially, the black flag represented the concept of no quarter. It meant that if the merchant ship chose to fight and was defeated, the pirates were justified in offering no mercy. They could execute the entire crew. The psychological impact was usually enough. The moment the Jolly Roger was clearly visible, the merchant crew knew their odds of survival. They knew the pirates were not interested in taking prisoners to join a navy. They were only interested in plunder and new recruits. If the merchant ship was slow and outmatched, the pragmatic decision was almost always to surrender immediately, as your previous captain did. A surrender under the Jolly Roger meant the pirates were obligated to offer quarter, to spare the lives of the crew and officers. The flag's terrifying reputation was its most powerful weapon, allowing the pirates to often take a valuable prize without firing a single cannon or shedding a drop of blood. With the merchant flag struck and the two ships bound together, the battle was over and the division of spoils began. The quartermaster, followed by a hand-picked boarding party, was the first to cross to the captured vessel. His first task was to secure the officers and take possession of the ship's log, manifests, and, most importantly, the stores. The captured crew, now gathered on their deck, were subjected to an interrogation. The pirates were particularly interested in two things: the destination of the cargo, to verify its value, and the identities of any skilled tradesmen, carpenters, surgeons, cooks, who might be valuable to the pirate cause. The ordinary sailors were often given the same stark choice you were: join the crew and be a free man, or be left to your original fate. The quartermaster then directed the taking of plunder. This was not a mindless ransacking. It was an organized selection process based on need and the pirate code. The ship's treasury, or coffer, was always the priority. Then, items of practical value: sails, spare rigging, tools, and navigational instruments. Next came the consumables: food, especially fresh meat, fruit, and alcohol. If the cargo itself was valuable, silks, gold, sugar, it was methodically transferred to the pirate vessel. The pirate ethic was a strange contradiction. They were thieves, but they were often far less destructive than one might expect. They rarely sank a ship unless they needed to eliminate all witnesses or if they decided to take the prize vessel for their own use. They took what they could and often left the original vessel with enough food and water to reach the nearest port. The strict accountability of the quartermaster ensured that every coin and valuable item was tracked, preventing any pirate from hoarding loot for himself, an offense punishable by death or marooning. With the plunder safely stowed, the next step was the pirate's ultimate necessity: a safe harbor. Gold, silver, and jewels could be carried on the ship, but bulky cargo, sugar, tobacco, cocoa, bolts of silk, needed to be sold for cash. This required a neutral port, a place where the Royal Navy's law did not reach, or where the local governor was corruptible. In the Golden Age, ports like Nassau in the Bahamas or certain isolated coves in Madagascar served as these havens. Here, the pirates found their true release. The quartermaster oversaw the auction of the goods to illicit merchants and fences, and the gold was finally weighed and divided according to the articles. The sailor, who had known only poverty and debt, was suddenly a wealthy man, flush with hundreds of pieces of eight. What followed was a frenzy of lavish spending. The pirates had no concept of long-term savings. Their life was short, their existence uncertain, and their money was to be enjoyed now. They would buy the finest clothes, the most expensive rum and brandy, and pay for the company of women. For a few glorious, drunken weeks, they lived like the rich merchants they preyed upon. They gambled away fortunes in a single night and drank themselves into stupors. This period of excess was as much a part of the pirate life as the sea itself. It was the fleeting, tangible reward for all the hardship, the violence, and the daily risk of the gallows. But inevitably, the gold ran out. The clothes grew ragged, the rum barrels emptied, and the hangover became permanent. Broke, restless, and with the Royal Navy beginning to circle the port, the pirates would sign the articles once more, climb aboard their ship, and sail out to sea to start the whole violent cycle all over again. The life you chose, the short, fierce life of the free man, was always a race against time. The vast majority of pirates did not die in a glorious cannon battle. They died from disease, from a splintered bone that turned septic, or from a wound sustained in a drunken brawl in a tropical port. But the death that haunted every pirate's thoughts, the one that affirmed their life's final act of defiance, was the hangman's noose. As the power of the British and Spanish navies increased, and as governors in the Caribbean began to offer pardons and bounties, the net tightened. When a pirate ship was finally cornered or a port was raided, the result was almost always the same. There was no mercy for the enemies of all mankind. The captured pirates were brought to a formal trial, often a mockery of justice, and then marched to a public gallows. Their executions were a spectacle, intended to terrify and discourage all other sailors from choosing the black flag. To die on the gallows was to pay the ultimate price for your freedom. You may have lived a short life, perhaps only a year or two, but it was a life entirely and absolutely your own. You chose your captain. You chose your rules. You voted on your fate. You risked everything for the brief, beautiful illusion of equality and self-rule on the wide-open sea, a life of absolute autonomy that no other working man in the 18th century could ever claim. You traded a long, slow, Miserable death as a slave to the merchant system for a short, sharp, spectacular one as a free man. And as you stand on the deck, feeling the sway of the deck beneath your feet and the salt spray on your face, you know you wouldn't have it any other way.